I'm John Batchelor. It's the election year 2000. Bill Clinton is in office. Al Gore is going to run very strongly to continue with the Clinton administration. It did not happen. However, there were expectations at the moment that the future, the 21st century, was bright because of the initiative of the Clinton administration towards North Korea, at that time regarded as the rogue state to solve. There's a meeting at the White House. This is the Clinton administration, so the president's there, as well as, we can believe, Sandy Berger, National Security Advisor, is somewhere in the area. And invited to this meeting is a very, very powerful North Korean military leader, Vice Marshal Jo Myung-nok. 45 minutes with Bill Clinton. Afterward, I learned from Claudia Rosett, Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, writing at Forbes. Afterwards, Mr. Clinton, then president, sent Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and the special advisor for North Korea, Wendy Sherman, yes, that's right, the same Wendy Sherman negotiated the Vienna Accords with Iran, to Pyongyang to talk to Kim Jong-il, the dictator, the father of Kim Jong-un, the present dictator. All of that is background to what we're now witnessing in Iran and in North Korea. Claudia, a very good evening to you. The subject of this meeting, 45 minutes, they were discussing defanging the Kim regime. What was the expectation of the Clintons at this point? What did they think what did the Clinton administration think it could achieve by giving a sit-down with a dictator's general? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. What it looks like they hoped to achieve was to cover up the fact that the nuclear deal struck with North Korea in 1994 was actually falling apart. The Clinton administration was aware that North Korea was cheating, did not want to own up to that. So what were they doing? They were trying to negotiate a missile deal with North Korea. In other words, never mind that the nuclear deal is falling apart, we'll have a missile deal. North Korea had lobbed a long-range missile test over Japan 2 years earlier in 1998. So the public story was, look, we're going to take care of this too. Privately, it was all falling apart.
Let's go back to the beginning, to 1994. There were warnings in 94 from a nearby president that Kim Jong-il and his father, there are three dictators. They're all related, grandfather, father, and son. So we're dealing with the Kim family, that the Kims were worthless, and their word was worthless. Who'd that warning come from, Claudia?
This was the warning of South Korea's president back in 1994, Kim Young-sam. And he, after watching in silent frustration for weeks as the Clinton administration bargained its way toward the 1994 nuclear deal with North Korea, finally gave a long interview to the New York Times in which he completely denounced the deal. He said it was a terrible mistake. It was going to lead to worse dangers. One of his main points was that they were going to sustain the North Korean regime. In other words, give it the chance to regroup at a rocky time following the fall of the Soviet Union, the death of founding tyrant Kim Il-sung, and America was going, and its friends were going to provide North Korea with the resources to survive that without actually changing the character of the regime. What he basically said was expect worse trouble ahead. The North Korea, in other words, was not going to stop making nuclear weapons. It was going to pause and regroup.
Surprisingly similar to events we now witness. We're expecting the debate in the United States Congress. We hope. We don't know, Claudia. There may not be enough votes for cloture. There might be no debate or vote. But in any event, much talk in Washington when the Congress all returns about the Vienna Accords negotiated by Wendy Sherman. You notice how the players are very similar here. In 1994, 19, and 2000, the Clinton administration was warned this will come to naught. Who is warning the Obama administration in the same fashion now?
It's now also the democratically elected leader of a close American ally who happens to lead the country most immediately threatened by the nuclear-seeking rogue state, and in this case with the Iran deal, it's Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been issuing in similar terms, actually even stronger, the warning that this deal, this Iran deal, will not stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. It will pave the way, much as the president of South Korea warned us 21 years ago about the nuclear deal with North Korea.
So you have very neatly constructed a time machine, Claudia. You've taken us back to 1994, forward to year 2000. Now here we are in 2015, and I can guess you are projecting out 8 or 9 years from now, because that's the parallel event here. 8 or 9 years from now, another American president will be negotiating with Iran over what? Nuclear missile proliferation, or over a ceasefire in the civil war, in the war with Arabia, something like that. 8 years from now.
John, at the accelerating pace of the world today, it may be even sooner. And what the North Korea experience gives us is an excellent guide to the trajectory that Iran is likely to follow if this Iran nuclear deal goes ahead, as seems likely. And that is just the way North Korea cut a nuclear deal in 94 and, in that case, 12 years later carried out its first nuclear test and is now amassing a nuclear arsenal, which nobody is stopping. Iran is going to follow that same trajectory, John, and just the way South Korea's president warned us and America's president, then Bill Clinton, rolled right past that. We now have Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu saying, beware, this is a terrible deal. You are going to sustain and embolden this regime, not stop it. Iran is going to take the same kind of course onto nuclear weapons. John, that's where it goes. And yes, the time machine, the parallels, there are many differences between Iran and North Korea, but in the main things, those parallels are huge. And I believe they hold. And the most significant differences, Iran is more dangerous than North Korea, and the Iran nuclear deal is even worse than the failed nuclear deal cut in 1994 by President Clinton.
You've arranged a nice piece of history here, Claudia, so I ask you to speculate a little bit. Do you believe that the deal empowered North Korea in 94 and again in 2000, and that empowerment is what Iran is copying?
Oh, yes. In 1994, North Korea had lost its Soviet subsidies. The Soviet Union had collapsed. It was on the ropes. And America stepped in and became this enormous sugar daddy for North Korea as part of this nuclear deal. By the late 90s, North Korea was the biggest recipient of U.S. aid in East Asia. And in similar fashion with Iran, it's not that they're going to get aid, but they have lots of oil. They're oil rich. And what the U.S. and its cohorts are doing is they're going to lift the sanctions on Iran, which will have free access to world oil markets, plus billions in unfrozen funds at the start, anywhere from 55 to 100 to 150 billion, depending on whose estimate you prefer. They're going to get this enormous windfall. A troubled Iranian economy is going to have resources flowing probably to the elements, the worst elements, the ones that keep the Iranians under the boot of the Islamic theocracy there. And yes, it's a great, again, it's a pit stop. It's a way to get some resources, get yourself back on your feet on the world scene. Iran has been enormously dignified, very much undeservedly, by these talks. Remember the scenes of the Iranian flag flanked by all the flags of the European Union, the United States, Russia, China on the stages of Vienna. The headlines for the foreign minister, the visits to Tehran. And all these are useful benefits for a dictatorship which wants to enjoy sort of the mark of legitimacy on the world stage, plus billions upon billions in resources easier to get hold of. You know, Iran was already violating sanctions, but that costs you a premium to do. Now it's just going to be able to trade out there, and there's nothing in this that suggests it's likely to transform the character of the Iran regime. Much more likely, this is an enormous windfall, as was enjoyed by North Korea with the 94 nuclear deal, an enormous windfall now for the Iranian regime. And what they're going to do with it, John, is almost certainly make nuclear weapons.
Yep. Claudia Rosett, journalist in residence with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. She heads the investigative reporting project, writing most recently at Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.